Let me ask you a question. What if you could do more with your retirement funds than just hope for the best? With My Digital Money, you can build a self-directed IRA that goes beyond the usual, combining Bitcoin, gold, and silver for real peace of mind. Imagine Bitcoin's explosive growth, the steady strength of gold, and silver's wildcard potential all working together in one powerful account. While the market zigzags and headlines keep you guessing, these assets help shield your future from inflation and uncertainty. Why let your future hinge on just one bet? With My Digital Money, you're in control. We allow you to invest in crypto, gold, and silver all under one roof, balancing risk and reward and opening the door to bigger opportunities. Don't settle for ordinary. Build a more balanced, resilient portfolio today so you can retire with confidence. Visit My Digital Money and see how easy it is to diversify and protect your retirement today. That is mydigitalmoney.com, or just click the link in the description. Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a new guest, Dr. Scott Young. Dr. Young is a practicing audiologist, business owner for 34 years, has been a World War II researcher since he was a child. He writes fiction, mostly historical fiction and nonfiction. He has 18 books to his credit. He's on YouTube, Telegram, and X. I'll be putting all the links at the bottom of the video. And I like to welcome Dr. Young to the X22 Report Spotlight. Dr. Young, welcome to the Spotlight.
Well, how are you doing today?
Hey, thanks for being here. I've been listening to some of your videos and your interviews about the economy, tariffs, and I think probably in the beginning of this year, President Trump said we're entering a golden age, and he started the tariff system. He mentioned that there's going to be no income tax. Maybe we'll get rid of the IRS. Now, people have asked me, is this possible? Is it true? I mean, how would he possibly do this? And for most, I think it sounds ridiculous. Because throughout our entire lives, what have we known? We've known taxes. We've known, the IRS. We've known that this is the way it works. So when you hear this and you start to do your research and you start to look into this, what's going to change? What are we in today? And what needs to happen?
Well, I mean, I started to look at this, in 2020. I started to say this, and I've been listening to you for a very long time frame. You've been opening up my eyes for years and years and years. I remember back in 2009, I had a friend of mine who's wanted me to talk about a business structure
Mhm.
that messed my brain up. He wanted me to open up a business structure, almost theoretically without the IRS. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. How do I do that? How do I do a P&L without an EBITDA in the bottom? And I was like, I have no idea how to do that. How do you do that without the P&Ls and all the write-offs on the bottom? I
Right.
just had no idea how to do that, because normally you want to have the write-offs on the bottom of the structure points, right? I mean, you have gross profit, and then you have the COGS and all the other fun things, and then you have net profits, and then there's these things that you want to have write-offs so that you pay less and less money, whether it's a C corporation or an S corporation. You don't want to pay the dreaded IRS amounts,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And that's because that's the flow through to the government, right? A C corporation is kind of a double taxation point. And most people either have an LLC or an S corporation for a company kind of basis. And so I have an S corporation, I have an LLC, I have a nonprofit as well. And so one of the things that happens is that we have these concepts out there that and when you have those ideas, they make your taxes very difficult. And so when he started to push that, he was talking to me. He goes, "You got to watch Dave with X22," and I was like, "Okay, how am I going to look at that?" And then as I started to say, "Wait a second, the IRS system is sick. It's a sick system," and people started to say, we needed to have a flat based tax. And people started to say, well, we should have a 10% tax system that would eliminate our tax system all the way down to maybe 90% of the people would be eliminated with the IRS, and we would have only 10% of our tax system. And I remember looking at that idea with him, but it never really gained any traction. And then in 2020, we started to see this the system of very few people talking about this idea. And but Trump really wasn't talking about it. And then we went into the dark ages with the Joe Biden
Right.
and the the fake systems of all the craziness that happened. And I think most of us realized from just the financial area, just leave aside, all the fix the craziness with the election issues, that all of us now really fully understand the election stuff was rigged.
Right.
When we put that stuff aside, the monetary system has just gone to hell in a handbasket. It has been ugly. We have been in our bankruptcy structure so dramatically over a very long time frame. I mean, it is so fixable. I actually did a video about this quite a while ago, actually a couple months ago, that shows our debt system is so unfixable. There's no way to make amends to it. And did you know that over the last 2 years, and I have plenty of IRS agents, last year in 2025, the IRS people actually admit that less than as many as 10% of the people didn't even file their taxes.
Wow.
And that's a scary number.
Yeah.
That's actually the reality is more than 25 or more percent of people didn't file their taxes. And so they're not telling you the actual truth. So you say, well, that is and here's the thing, more than 200 or excuse me, 20 different distributing centers for the IRS have actually closed already. So the systems are closing themselves left and right. And so I started to look at this, and Trump started to say more clearly through his new election cycle in 2024 that we were going to we were going to replace the IRS system, and I was like, thank you God, we were going to see the closure of the IRS. And there are some estimates that anywhere from $2 to $5 trillion is our budget system. So it depends on how you want to look at it with it too. And the IRS system is the sickest system out there. It's how we bring in the money.
Right.
And then we started to realize the Doge part of this. And we realized that Doge actually is the system that actually looks at all the sickness of what is brought in, is the fraud-based portion of it as well. And then we had the Nick Shirley kind of look at the different state things. And I started to realize how much of our monies, frankly, almost everything that we spend out to the states is fraud. So when we realize that most of what we spend out to the states, as much as they actually admit $1.5 trillion of our monies, and this is easily verifiable, $1.5 trillion of our monies is fraud. It's not even needed.
Right.
So if you believe that we may take in $2.5 trillion from the IRS system, therefore, right then at that point, and 1.5 trillion is probably fraud, and that is just a verifiable point. We can actually see a possibility that almost all of it is potentially fraud. Now, The tariff system is something that I didn't even perceive was a possibility. We've had tariffs for quite a long time. From all of us have seen tariffs for more than 200 years.
Right.
But Trump started to bring in the tariff system that is anywhere from 300 million or $300 billion upwards of $900 billion now. That is completely changed the way that we look at tariffs, and all the countries are willing to pay it.
Yeah. What's interesting about all this is that I think it's the mindset of the people, because I explain it to people who ask me, and I, and they want to know how can we do this, and why would Trump take in money externally? When you look at our country today, and if you look at a corporation, would you ever go to your employees and say, listen, to keep the company operational, I need 20% from every single employee? You would never do that. I mean, the employees, they would say, I'm not giving you 20% of my money or to
Right.
keep the company. So why would we, as an American who works every day, why would we give over 20, 30, 40, and in some cases, 40 to 50%? Why would we give that money over to the government to keep it operational? It just doesn't make sense to me. In my head, it doesn't make sense. But we've been taught that this is normal. You got to pay your taxes. You have to live this way. And I think this is where Trump has to convince the people that it doesn't have to be this way.
Well, there's a funny meme that is rotating around Twitter. I'm still old school. I just call it Twitter all the
Yeah.
time too. And that the British in 1775, or sorry, the Americans in 1775, we would throw over our tea for a 4% tax, and yet we're totally fine with as much as 40% tax of our income.
Hmm.
And when we realize that, we're so fine with this ugly amount of tax, and if you realized how much tax that we actually have, do you know that as a business owner, I have property taxes on what I actually have paid. So, for instance, so I buy a piece of furniture, and everything that I actually have every single year, I have to pay a property tax. Now we're talking about I'm leasing my building. I mean, or
Hmm.
I'm leasing my area, and people don't even know this, that the county, or the city auditors actually require a property tax of my furniture. I'm like, wait a second, why do I have to pay a property tax on things that I already own that I paid a sales tax on?
That is true.
And that's a double taxation.
Yes.
And you go, wait a second, I paid sales tax on it. And we never talk about these kinds of double taxation points that we have. For instance, when you buy anything that is new, there is no problem in paying something a taxation on something that is new. But why would you have to pay something a second time on it used? So there is another level of taxation that we keep coming up with that. There's just lots of crazy little points of taxation. Property taxes is a whole nother a level of taxation that we kind of, when we want to dig into that one, we go, wait a second, that is ridiculous there.
Right.
But when I've started to do the math, and I remember, probably I get up every morning about 3:30 to 4:30 in the morning, and I get up, I turn off all of my electronics, and I spend time with the Lord in the dark. And one of the things I do is I say, God, what do you want me to listen to? What do you want me to, and I'm not talking about listening to anything external. What do you want to say?
Mm.
What am I missing right now? And I remember one of the big ones was, what's the math? What's not mathing right now correctly? And God was saying, I want you to look into the tariff thing. I'm like, why should I look at the tariff thing? And what it was is this conversation of how much we were looking at the math of the tariff from the external sources. And so as I started to put together the math of the tariff, is we're starting to see that it's about $900 billion that Trump is bringing in the tariff point. And that $900 billion is actually changing our whole perspective on everything. And you know that every single country is completely fine with us, them paying it to us.
Yes. Yeah.
They're 100% fine. Did you know at the WEF there's a beautiful video? Even Gavin Newsom's sitting in the back, shoved in the back. Every single WEF person, that means all of the billionaires, all of the bigwigs, stand up when Trump walks in the room, and they're giving him honor. We're not talking about like a standing ovation. They stand up in honor. Now, some people want to say, like he's the king of the world. That's the silliness statement. That's just honor. And that's at the exact same time frame that what he got. And here's I want to highlight something that he got. He got Greenland. And this is one of the best business deals that anyone ever has brought up. And if you don't mind if I bring this up, I'm sure you brought this up, but I find this one of the most fascinating business deals I've ever heard of before. When I researched the Greenland issue, Greenland has we've had some military bases in World War II. We built it up quite a bit. We've done quite a few things over there. We've helped Greenland to modernize itself. And yet Denmark has been paying for some things, but they have put them in servitude. And the people, there are only 56,000 people in that area. There are underground military bases that we know that are hiding some really bad people over there.
Okay.
And so what he did is that he negotiated a deal that Denmark has to keep paying for us to. I mean, they have to pay for it for the rest of eternity. We get to basically keep the citizens up and running. They get to be part of, just like Puerto Rico, they get to be, in essence, some level of citizenship. And we also get to have the airspace of the Arctic Circle. So we get to see any ICBM that gets to come over, and they get to. It's like getting a free apartment for the rest of our lives, and someone else gets to pay for it.
Right.
And I walked away like, wait, how do I get to sign up for that kind of deal?
Yeah.
And that's what he did at the WEF meeting. And it sets up the Monroe, it's part of the Monroe Doctrine that he did the same thing with Venezuela just a couple days later. Mm-hmm. And he takes care of the Mexico issue only a couple days later after the supposed tariff loss. And you say, wow, this is some amazing stuff. So that's why I think that, we're not spending enough time on how we hear the media talking about, oh, he can't take tariffs anymore. I'm like, no, that's not even what they actually said.
No, I agree. I think he used the weakest tariffs because he knew that they were going to sue, because they always sue. I mean, that's just part of it. They always attack them. They always sue. And I think he used the weakest tariffs, which was the IEEPA, I think, tariffs. And then he had other avenues where he was able to use section, what is it, 122 or 232 or
Yeah,
there's
one, two,
many,
two.
yeah, there's many different sections. So he was able to use those tariffs and, basically keep everything operational. Now, of course, they're also suing now because of the Supreme Court ruling. They want him to start paying back the companies, even though they said the people were paying for the tariffs. It's funny how the money's not going back to the people; it's going back to the companies. So they want, yeah, they want, they're suing now for Trump to go ahead and start refunding the companies. But I think it's kind of a wash because if he's implementing 10% or 15% tariffs, he's going to be taking in a lot more money under these different sections. So does he really have to pay anything back?
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Here's the funniest thing that I realized what he did. So he loses the IEEPA, which is 1977 law, and it's section 122, right? So he goes, oh, okay. So it's like me driving from, I live in the Tulsa area. So like if I'm going to drive from Tulsa to Denver, okay,
Hmm.
so I used to grow up in Denver. It's like saying, well, I can't drive on this one road. So he's basically saying, "Oh, I can't drive on the road. Fine, I'll just take a different route.
Right.
It's fine. You're doing road construction on that road. I'll just take a different road. No problem at all." That's exactly what he said. But what he did say is that I can take a different road. It's not a problem at all. I can, and he had 150 days to have an emergency action. And the date was 2/20 of 2026. What happened on 2/20/20, 2 of 21? The Mexican El Mencho dies that next day. I find that fascinating. So he takes out the $20 billion El Mencho dude
Hmm.
the very next day. I think it's fascinating. So he takes out the fentanyl dealer of all fentanyl dealers
Right.
and totally disrupts him. And he puts in and he says he has an emergency order now. And I always go, so what emergency order does he have in that he could utilize? I'm sorry, I'm putting my dog down. She wants to be sitting up on my lap. So he can utilize different emergency orders. And what would those emergency orders be? Well, let me give you an example of one that's really a fun one. Executive Order 13818, one that you've talked about a
Hmm.
100,000 times. It's one of our favorite ones that we both talked about in different ways. It's the one that says if you have human rights issues against you, that if those human rights are that we're going to basically, and it's the way that I call it, that would bankrupt you. So we'll
Right.
block the property against you. And I remember when I first read about it is in 12/20 of 2017. It said it would block the property. And I thought, block the property, like what the heck does that mean? I mean, if you had a property on in Manhattan, I mean, can't you just buy another property someplace else?
Right.
But what that really means is it blocks everything that you have. And and by the way, Scott Bessent the other day was talking about this exact same thing with the central bank of Iran. They blocked all the Iranian dollars
Hmm.
and they closed it all down in December. This actually, they closed all the Iranian dollars and they dropped it down to a zero number. And we were seeing this, I actually was watching this in November and December, that they dropped the currency down and it caused a massive disruption. Well, guess what? This kind of thing was occurring in 2017. And this is why the deep state has been going crazy. And we've seen that same kind of thing from that point in time on. It's just been a slow roll, excuse me, a slow roll all the way through and through. So what he has the ability to do is just take one of those different routes. And so and that's why I believe the Epstein files are now finally dropping and sitting in the Senate areas, and they're bringing out these kind of capabilities. And that's why you're seeing like the Minnesota governor sitting up there talking about different things, because they're talking about all the different ways that we can claim against them. And at
Mhm.
the same time, we're seeing the FBI walking into Fulton County. We're seeing the FBI taking all the files in Arizona. So that's Executive Order 13848, which is an emergency order for election law.
Right. And
So
that's the one that Biden kept renewing.
exactly,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
Crazy.
which is so funny
Yeah.
because I mean that was done on 9 of 2018.
Hmm.
And and as an audiologist, one of the things I love, this is one of my favorite things, and most people don't think about it from an audiologist standpoint. So I actually have to calibrate all of my audiometers every single year. Okay, so for instance, I just had this done in January. So I have to calibrate all my machines. And if I don't calibrate my machines, and by the way, there was a big snowstorm, and the calibrator was going, well, I can't come in till like, 2 or 3 weeks later. I'm like, dude, you can't not come. My machines are going to be out of calibration. And if it's not in calibration, I mean, the insurance companies can come in and wipe me out.
Hmm.
You understand? I'm screwed. And so what happens, and what most people don't realize is, and there are several people have shown this kind of thing, and Mike Lindell, in his gorgeous responses that he showed, is that the Dominion machines were uncalibratable or uncalibrated from 2017 on, which means that the 2018, the 2020, and the 2022 election, and I don't know about the 2024. I still haven't figured that one out exactly if it was recalibrated or not. But we know that the 18, 2020, and 2022 elections were um, invalid elections.
I agree. I,
So we got 32 states that have messed up elections. And one of the things that's fascinating about the uh, the the 13848 the executive order of that is that it says that we are in a state of national emergency. And I didn't think about that because so I was sitting with my friend Mary Crowley. She was in just this morning. She's in Israel right now,
mhm.
and so she has these EASs that were going off from her phone, and she's in I can't remember which province in Israel, and she said, it's just going off almost every day, and right at the end of our broadcast,
Mhm.
her EAS goes off. And she goes, normally got like 2 minutes to shoot out and go out to the bomb shelter.
Right.
And I'm thinking, wow. So we got like a potential EAS that's ready to happen. And Trump is saying we have a national emergency, which is exactly what he needs for tariffs to occur. So he's basically given by SCOTUS points 150 days to find a new route to be able to accomplish this. So by SCOTUS orders, he has 150 days to find a different route
Hmm.
to pay this. So he doesn't even have to pay it back at all until he finds a different route. And he goes, I got plenty of different ways to drive from here to Kansas City or wherever he wants to, in essence, the new route.
Yeah.
To,
No, that's true. I mean, I mean, they tried to stop him, and if you notice, it's becoming much more difficult as time goes on. The lawsuits aren't working as well. He's winning the appeals, and it seems like they're having a very difficult time at this point trying to stop everything that he's doing. And if you look at all the pieces that are all coming together around the world, I think he's slowly but surely, and I don't know if people see it or they don't see it, he's dismantling their entire system, including the banking system. A lot of people don't talk about the banking system, and a lot of people don't, understand that the banking system is part of all of this. Central banks cause inflation, and that is a threat to you, your savings account, your retirement. Ask yourself an honest question. Does your dollar go as far as it did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even last year? So what does the next decade look like for you and your savings? If your portfolio lacks exposure to gold, one of history's most reliable economic hedges, it's time to rethink your strategy. Gold has kept up with inflation and in many periods outpaced it. My friends at Noble Gold Investment specialize in helping people protect their wealth with physical gold and silver. Whether you're rolling over an IRA or making a direct purchase, their team walks you through the entire process and makes it very simple. No pressure, just education and experience. Right now, all new qualified accounts will receive a free 1/10 of an ounce American Gold Eagle as a thank you. Visit X22Gold.com. That is X22Gold.com and discover how easy it is to protect your financial future. Or just click the link in the description. And remember, past performance may not be indicative of future results. Investing in precious metals involves risk. Consult your financial advisor before making investment decisions. And they think it's just, see, what the thing is, a lot of people think it's just, like Tim Walz or Hillary Clinton or Obama. But this goes, I mean, the banking system, I'm talking about the private Western Central Bank system. This goes back way, way back in time. And think about it, it's like a disease. I mean, yeah, you have all these different symptoms that come off of the central bank system. You get corruption, you get money laundering, you get all these different things. But again, you always have to go back to the source to cure it. So if we just arrest Hillary, if we just arrest Obama, if we just, stop the fraud in Minnesota, it it doesn't really stop anything because that's just a symptom of what's really happening behind the scenes. And that is the creation of currency out of thin air.
Correct. I mean, the thing I keep going back to as a guy that researches the heck out of the stuff
Hmm.
is that until the reason why, I mean, I always kind of ask the question. I'm a weird guy on this kind of stuff. I always ask the question, why does SCOTUS care? I mean, like
Right.
if you're bringing in $900
Right.
billion dollars, like if I work for Dave
Hmm.
and I'm bringing in like, let's say I'm making up numbers, let's just say, you know, um, let's say Dave has a big old business, right? And let's say Dave's got a $20 million business. Okay. And I'm making up numbers,
That'd be
right?
nice, though.
And is so Dave's got his $20 million business and Scott's working for him, right? And he's got a $20 million business and he's got 20 employees. Okay. And of the employees, Scott works for him, and Scott makes $5 million. So if there's 20 employees, Scott makes $5 million, but he's always mad at Scott. Like, after a while, you'd be like, someone should be going to Scott. I mean, going to Dave and say, can you stop being mad at Scott because he's bringing in more than everyone else? What's wrong with Scott? I mean,
Hmm.
maybe you should like calm down with Scott, or maybe you should, repair your relationship with Scott because he's bringing in a lot of money. Maybe you guys need to work together and figure out some of your issues. That's what I would say, because here's what's happened with the tariff issue. It has completely changed our trade imbalance. We've had an absolute underneath a negative trade imbalance. When you look back in 2021, and frankly, way before that, we are at a complete positive number in the trade imbalance point.
Right.
We're at a positive number today, and so which we're making money from money coming in. So we've completely flipped that number. We have $900 billion coming in. So I kind of go say, wait a second, why does anyone have a problem with bringing in money to America? Um, and it's not hurting anything. It's not causing you any problem. So I kind of say, who's having a problem with it? And here's what it is. It's it's the replacement of the IRS. And when you kind of realize, what does the IRS, who's the boss of the IRS? And the reality is, the boss of the IRS goes right back to the Congress. And when you take one other step, it's the Fed. And the two things that I keep talking about more than anything else is end the Fed. When you have the end the Fed, you got to say this one thing. We got to go up. This is my belief: is we have to go on to a gold-backed currency. This is what we were pre 1913. When we were in a gold-backed currency, we had a positive kind of capability. We had Treasury that set a gold standard, and we had people that kept their money, which had no IRS at the exact same time frame of 1913. We had the IRS that came into existence, the Fed came into existence, and you go, wait a second. People kept all their money. They were able to live and do their things. We had tariffs that came in. That's how we paid for everything. We had sales taxes that was called a use tax. You mean that we were okay at the time frame? And actually there's a fascinating little tiny video that it's probably a 10 or 15-second long video. I'll have it right now. Did you know that Howard Lutnick talks about this, that Trump and Lutnick talk about this all the time, that from 1870 all the way to 1913, they talk about this in all these meetings, that they talk about that time frame, and people go, well, what's that mean? What's that time frame? That is the time frame when the Corporation of America started to the beginning of the Fed. And so we realized that the Fed was created, the concept of the Fed was created in 1871, and all the way to which is the basics of how Washington, D.C. came into existence as a concept, to all the way to the creation of the Fed. And so that is the central banking system.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, it's the third one in this country. And there have been central bank systems beyond the United States, in the UK, in Spain, in France. They've had them for thousands of years.
Right.
They go back a very long time. And a lot of people, don't realize this. And if you read the Federalist Papers, you read what Andrew Jackson wrote about the central bank. Of course, they called them money changers back then, and they just had different names for them. But they were always fighting against them, always. And
Hamilton was the first one to bring it in.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
And by the way, the Civil War, and I went back and studied pre-Fed banking during the Civil War, and we started to realize that was part of the Civil War wasn't just about the North and the South and the slavery issue. It was just part of it. It was to stop more of the small banking kind of things. It was to collapse from 1,500 banks down to about 800 banks. That was part of what they were doing. And it was to kind of get down to a smaller number of banks so that they could do this. And they were moving money. They would move money outside the nation and bring it back in. And it would just collapse out those banks. And this is part of what their whole goal was, is to get into that time frame.
Yeah, I mean it's centralizing everything. So it's almost like today when you look at the big banks today. I mean, you have J.P. Morgan Chase, you have Bank of America. I mean, these are the you might have smaller banks, but not as many as it used to be. You have much larger banks now, with everyone going to maybe the big five or whatever it is, and you can see that it makes it much easier for them to control what's happening.
But the reality that the banks are right now, and this is what most people don't realize, is that we have $106 trillion in personal and business debt in America.
Right.
We have $39 trillion of this fake national debt. But we only have $5 trillion. If we push together like every dollar that we have of just the monies that are in the bank, we're already at a bankruptcy phase.
Yeah.
I think people like Dave, if you guys have been listening to Dave for a very long time, he's known this for a long time. He's known that we've been at a bankruptcy phase, and if you've been listening to him for a long time, this is something he's known. This is why I listened to him for a long time. And I've been knowing this too, is that I kind of felt like we were at the bankruptcy phase in 2020, and I felt like we needed to move to that bankruptcy phase. We needed to get off of the Fed kind of thing. And so I felt like we were kind of over the cliff. But what I've learned as I've looked at what the banking systems have done is that 2023, that's when they've really gone off the cliff. And so what we had to see is the Biden system go in and instead of just running up the credit card a little bit, it's like having a $60,000 credit card, and you really didn't have the money in the credit card, but you had a $60,000 limit credit card. You maybe had $20,000 on it, and you kept calling up the bank and saying, "No, I want you to put it up to 80,000 and 85 and then $90,000." And then what happens is you ran it up to the very, very limit, and then you opened up new accounts, and say the wife was doing that or the husband was doing that, and then guess what? You ask for a divorce, and the spouse is going, "Wait a second, what? I have no idea." This is what America is sitting with. If you knew how much money is sitting with the central banks, the 13 Fed banks, that the amounts of debt that they have that is unsolvable, it would choke your Wheaties. You would be spitting up in the morning. And many of us have been looking at it going, I have no idea how you solve that stuff. It's so far and beyond, it's not even solvable. And none of the economists are listening to us, looking at it saying, that's unfixable.
Well, I mean, they just play it off for years. I mean, the only time they look at it is when Trump is in office. I mean, that's the only time they start bringing things up. But otherwise, they just kind of put it to the side throughout all these years because the debt has been accumulating over time. The central bank is actually kind of in debt in all of this. So, I mean, do you think it's possible for Trump with the tariff system? I call it the energy system, the gold card system, everything that he's putting together. You think it's possible to remove us from the central bank system?
Yeah, I do. But I still think that we have to have we have to flip out of the system by going to a gold back system. I personally believe you have to do it because you got a system of it'd be like this way. This is how I kind of explain it. If your son came to you and said, Dad, I gotta get fixed. My budget's so out of whack. And you go, okay, fine. Let's tell me what's going on. And you realize that your son has been making, $50,000 a year. You're like, okay, good. So how long have what's your budget like? And he finally just shows you all the receipts. And he's been he's been spending like he's been making $150,000 a year. And you say, great. How long has that been going on for? Now, if it's been going on for 6 months, you probably can fix it, right? You might be able to help shove in a few bucks. You can help him out with that and kind of get him over the hump, right? But the reality is he's been doing this for 5 years. I'm going to tell you a statistic that will shake you, to your core. This is how much we've actually been doing just with the creation of cash, and we're not talking about physical cash. From 1913 to 2020, we created 20% of all monies ever created in the history of our Federal Reserve System. 20%.
Okay.
From 2020 to 2025, we created 80% of every dollar that has ever been created. It is a multiplicity effect that is unfathomable.
Hmm.
Sorry, that's a hard word for me to say. Um, so in essence, what we have is that kid that comes to you, been spending $150,000. What he's been doing it is been doing it for 5 years. And the only thing that you got to tell him is we got to do a bankruptcy. So in essence, we can live with the tariff system,
Hmm.
but the budget is unsolvable. So what we have to do is we have to have a bankruptcy. So we have to flip them, and that's what I believe has to happen. We have to shove that, and Trump has said this. We have to shove that thing in bankruptcy and say, Federal Reserve System, all those different people, you guys get to say this null and void. And guess what? It's in the 14th Amendment under the fourth section. And I did a deep dive on this several months ago. In the 14th Amendment under the fourth section, it
Hmm.
actually stipulates if you have in essence, a central bank, if you create a central bank, the central bank, that debt is null and void. So in essence, when you create a central bank, and people think it only relates to the federal debt, it very straightforwardly can be easily put into the personal debt, because most personal debt that you have is done with your with credit card, with uh, all the other kinds of debts, is an unpayable debt anyway.
Right.
And when you look at those debt debt points, they're completely unpayable. They're so out of reach. They're so out of touch. There's just no way for that to be excuse me, be payable. And so what happens in there, the systems are so deep in debt, there's just no way to pay them out. And so I believe that what happens is the central banking system just has to swallow it.
Well, I'm also wondering, since we're also seeing the fraud across the country, and I remember going back in time with Fed Chair Bernanke when he was testifying, and they were asking, where did the $500 billion, where did it go? He had no idea where it went. He had no idea who was receiving it. He said other banks were getting it. So again, if if the central bank is sending a $500 billion to places unknown, how
Right.
are we then responsible for any of that? Because again, it's almost like Elon Musk finding the 14 computers in the treasury where they were creating the currency. They were just
Perfect.
being sent out to who knows where. And then they're saying, oh yeah, that we'll just add that to the debt. We'll just keep adding that, and that's the way it will work. So again, there might even be some fraud. I'm just like we're seeing it in Minnesota. I mean, California, Colorado, New York. I mean, you name it. I think we're going to see fraud all across the country. I mean, it just. I think the whole thing is just one gigantic fraud system. But if you show that all of this, even the central bank, because you don't know the inner workings of the central bank, we haven't audited the central bank. And when I say that, oh yeah, we've looked at, no, I mean a deep forensic audit to see, what did they transfer to other central banks? What did they make the Americans pay for? Because we've been paying for everything.
Correct.
Yeah.
When you look at at a whole bunch of different areas, after a little bit, I mean, I know we don't like this idea of even. I'm going to get into a conversation of personal debt, and I know some people will get really really upset about this one point, but that when you calculate all the personal debt, you calculate all the business debt, there are points of debt that come up. I've done the calculations with commercial debt issues, that some of it is so deep and wide that the country can't possibly handle it. Um, we have so much commercial debt that it is choking America. There's no way for anyone to accomplish that personal debt. That it will absolutely choke the commercial real estate market. The auto debt will come is so deep and wide that it will shut down the states for the auto industry. So let me tell you this: auto industry runs the sales tax. Sales tax for so when we think about how the states run, 90% of the money that is brought in for the states to actually function comes in because of sales tax. So we bring that in, but it comes from auto sales. Well, right now we are in the greatest amount of debt because of auto sales, and auto sales are crashing. And in the last 5 years, the car market is completely crashing because we have the highest amount of debt in there. We have the highest amount of monies. The prices are completely overwhelming people, and the percentage rates are ridiculous. So no one's buying anything anymore. And so we've got a crisis sitting over there. We've got a crisis in the housing market, and some people are not seeing it because we've had these crazy things like BlackRock coming and buying houses, multi houses with that kind of thing. So there's fraud based points of houses, and so we haven't really seen exactly what happens. We haven't seen personal people buying houses necessarily. We've seen a small amount of that, and when that gets shut off, where these Japanese places or Chinese or other places don't come in and buy up the housing market kind of things, and we see just individuals buying houses, what you'll see is no one's really buying any houses, and it will choke the markets. And so we're seeing all of these things happening. It will completely drop all the markets all at once, and it will completely wipe everything out. And that's why we're saying, I look at this and go, the monetary system is crashing. All these things are crashing. We have the gold. Gold is going to incredible levels, right? We have gold is up at what, 5,100, which is
Around there, yeah.
crazy numbers.
Yeah.
And it has been crushed down. Silver is being crushed by the banking system, and it's still at what, 95, which should probably be sitting correctly at what, 300, if we were being honest.
Yes.
And yet the stock market is at historic levels, which it shouldn't be. It's a paper dragon, and it shouldn't be that way with an economy that shouldn't actually be in that kind of circumstance, because the debt isn't sitting correctly. And that's why I say the economists aren't being honest with everyone, because if people don't have the money to be able to accomplish everything. And so what we're seeing this thing is we have to have a balance in the system. And so when we don't have enough disposable income to be able to accomplish anything. So how do we fix that? We have to see a complete fix and a flip. And that's why I think one of the things that would happen is that we would see a flip of a gold-backed currency. What that would do is it would instantaneously flip us from a debt-based economy to an asset-backed economy. And you'd see the IRS go completely away. And by the way, I have IRS people who talk to me daily, and they know that we're almost ready for that to happen.
So do you think we're going to go back to the Constitution? We're going to go back to gold standard?
100%. I mean, I used to believe, I had predicted, and I'm dead on wrong. I had predicted that we would be at $5,000 for gold. And there was a woman in 1986, and I wish I still had her article. And she said, if you and that, I think gold at the time in 86 was like $380 or something other. And she said, if you deleted the Fed and the government from messing with gold, she said it would be at $5,000. So I thought she was a fascinating read when I had her article. And so I had said, well, that probably is the idea. Well, Jim Rickards, who used to work for Bush, I think it was, had said that gold was going to hit 27K. And I thought he was losing his mind. Well,
Hmm.
now he sounds like he's reasonable.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, and a couple of my other, so I'm kind of a little bit more of a conservative dude, maybe at 10K, but when you realize what might occur if gold is set at 10, and it will be set by Treasury. I mean, it's always set by Treasury. If you set gold at 10 to 20 K, what happens is that a certain number of people would come in and then they would sell their gold. What would that mean? I mean, that would spur an economy, even if 50% of the people would sell their gold to Treasury, or basically they would go to their gold places. They would sell their gold. They would it would spur the economy in dramatic ways, almost an instantaneous base. It would be so fascinating to systems, and then they would invest in new businesses, all kinds of crazy cool things, um, and you would see the IRS go away, because at that moment in time the Fed would be dead.
Mm.
um, and and Judy Shelton, she has a book called As Good as Gold, and she's been talking about a gold-backed currency many ways. um, it, she's predicted it, same kind of thing, that we
Yeah.
believe it will be a gold-backed currency. um, I just know that that's the way that you have to do it. And so I think that we'll be in that kind of system. And at the same time, I think we'll see the end of the IRS, and we would see the IRS turn into a collection agency of the tariff.
This could be my last question here. If we go
Sure.
back a little bit in time, you remember when Elon said, let's audit Fort Knox? And Trump said, let's audit Fort Knox. Do you think they started the narrative, and you think they just wanted people to think about that, and eventually they will audit how much gold we have?
I think exactly what you think of it. You just have a unique way of saying that. I think for you and I, it is a narrative statement. It's basically what you and I have all believed is there's no money at Fort Knox.
Hmm.
Or excuse me, there's no gold there. If I were doing it, I would have said there's nothing there. We open up the doors and there's nothing there anyway. So I don't believe there's anything been there for a very long time. Um, what's the movie with the Bond movie with Goldfinger? I think it is. I just believe that what's at Fort Knox is basically telling you that the Fed has never had any gold for a very long time. Do you know what's funny is gold by the Fed has been set at $42.22.
Hmm.
And it's a really stupid number. It was set in what is it, 1942, by the Bretton Woods Conference, and so they would be swamped by that number, and that's fine. It would basically bankrupt them, which is completely fine. They've been bankrupting America, and so we would just bankrupt them back and just swamp them with all the debt anyway. We would just throw the debt on them. And by the way, when you go through a bankruptcy, when anyone goes through bankruptcy, no one ever gets any money back. I mean, no one ever pays anything. If in that fictional statement that we talked about, Dave is the $20 million business owner, right?
Right.
And Dave goes through bankruptcy. Anyone tries to come up with to Dave and ask for money, back, they have to get in a big old nasty line, you know, and if Dave doesn't have any money, well, they get in line and they get pennies on the dollar.
Hmm.
Maybe if they get in the front of the line, they might get some cash, but not really. No one really gets any money in a bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we are in. And I think that we're in that circumstance of statement where I think that we're going to see that time frame where we're going to see that gold system of that narrative of statement of the gold is there, it's just not where you think it is.
I agree. Dr. Young, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. If people wanted to see your work, where should they go?
Well, mine's the easiest, drscottyoung.com. And I have a new book. Actually, my
Okay.
19th book, it's on the tribulation. It's just called Tribulation. It's my first hardcover book. It was really hard to do. Hardcover is a hard one to do, but that's where my newest book with that as well.
Do you have a picture of it with you right there, or I could put one on the screen?
Actually, yep, it's right
There it
here.
is.
It's a
Perfect.
hardcover book, so you can find it at drscottyoung.com. It's not going to be anything but a hardcover because it was a color book with that too. So
Okay. Great. I'll put all the links at the bottom of the video. Dr. Young, thank you very much for being on the spotlight. I really appreciate it.
love to come back on with you too sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.